I either represent you or I don't. Those individuals who I don't represent or I can't represent, that's the title. The title is representative. If you feel as though my principles do not represent your principles, then vote for the other guy, because I'm not going to alter mine just so that I can get a political title or a political office. And I think that's, you can't have a strong America and not have men and women who do that.
MidSouth Viewpoint, a Christian news and information feature of Bott Radio Network 640 AM, discussing the news, views, issues, and concerns that affect our community. Join us now for today's edition of MidSouth Viewpoint.
Good afternoon. I'm Pat McClurkin, and this is MidSouth Viewpoint on Bott Radio Network. And I am in the studio today with my co-host, Josh Davis. And Josh, we've got a guest that we are really excited about. And it's Representative John DeBerry, and it's my first time to meet him, and I am so excited because I have been reading some articles on you, and it's just refreshing to find out that you have stood by your convictions and some things with the upcoming election, and we're going to talk about that today. But welcome to MidSouth Viewpoint.
Thank you for having me.
And I know that after reading your bio that you are not only a lawmaker, but you're a businessman. I'm not sure what kind of business you're in.
Yes, ma'am.
But I know you have a business, and you're also an ordained minister.
Yes, ma'am.
And so all of those things are exciting to me because my husband was a Christian businessman and still is for many years, and it's refreshing to see people practice biblical principles in their business. So we're excited to have you today. So we're going to get right into asking you some questions. And one of the things I know that probably is maybe somewhat of a concern of yours, your district has changed.
Yes, ma'am. It
And
has.
so the people that normally have voted for you are not necessarily going to be the ones that have voted for you. So tell our listeners just what's happening there and how you're being somewhat attacked by the people that are in your district now.
Well, you know, we've had reapportionment, of course, which we have every 10 years. And in the last reapportionment and dividing the districts up, I have several precincts that I have not had in the past. And there are folks who don't necessarily share my views, or at least they tell me I don't share their views, and that I'm not one who is progressive enough in their viewpoint, considering their views and their issues and the things that they want to espouse. So we have a healthy disagreement, if I can put it in that way, concerning the things that they believe and the things that I believe. And I think a lot of times the issue comes with my opinion is different from theirs, and I'm not supposed to have a different opinion. And that's just not the way I do business.
Well, Josh, we're talking about the homosexual agenda, which you and I have discussed many times on the show. And now that you have an area where a lot of homosexuals reside, you are not for same-sex marriage. You are for marriage between one man and one woman. Mm-hmm. And you've been clear on that, and you've not wavered at all, which I really appreciate. You have taken a stand. And but that's not to say you don't love those people and you would not help them. You just disagree with what they believe God intended for marriage. And so, Josh, you know, I want you to jump right in and help us with this, because you and I have dealt with this a lot, and you either agree with them or you become their enemy.
That is correct, and I can tell you from experience, Representative DeBerry, I used to work with David Fowler, and I know you and David are buddies, and used to work together in the state legislature. And the folks that lead the Tennessee Equality Project can be kind of vicious when they come after you, and I know you're seeing that right now. But I wanted to ask you, because you have been an advocate and have stood up for what most of us might call the social issues, for traditional family, for protecting life. And that's a break from a lot of folks that are in the Democratic Party. Kind of tell us how you came to those views, and has it been hard to hold on to them when your party, for the most part, doesn't see it the same way?
Well, I'm a lifelong Democrat. My mother, and my father, before they passed, were both Democrats. Of course, our grandparents and great-grandparents were Republicans, as were many African Americans back in the Eisenhower era. But, I don't feel as though I have changed anything. I have maintained these beliefs the majority of my life. These are the things that my father taught, my parents taught, my grandparents taught, as far as the sanctity of life and as far as understanding that marriage is not an institution that was created by the state or by the civil government or by some type of presidential decree. Marriage was an institution created by God in the very beginning, and I think to deviate from that is to deviate from principles that we have held as a nation, not just as a party, but as a nation from the beginning of this nation. When you look back at our Constitution, you look back at our history, you look back at what those individuals that we call the fathers of our nation, these are views that they had. So as a Democrat, maybe somehow the party and the party's convictions and the party's principles and the party's beliefs may have altered or metamorphosed, but I didn't. I didn't change anything. These are the things that I've been talking about my entire life.
Well, this brings up another question that I have, because I've heard many African American ministers say, I disagree with President Obama on his stand for gay marriage. I disagree with him on the sanctity of life. But then when asked if they were going to vote for him, their answer is always yes. And my question to you is, those things are so important to me. In fact, when candidates come to me and say, would you support me? Would you work for me? Would you help me? And I said, well, I need to ask you about 3 questions. And if they don't answer those questions in a way that lines up with biblical principles, or if they refuse to answer them, then my answer is no. Because to me, what you believe, your core values, shapes everything about you. And what I appreciate about you, and after reading all this information on you, is that you did not waver, even though they were saying, we're not going to vote for you, we're going to work against you, we're going to get candidates to run against you. You did not do anything that was politically correct. You said, I believe what I believe, and I'm going to stand firm on these convictions. And that endeared you to me. I will tell you it did, because I don't see that all the time now in politics. So why is it that people believe one way and vote another way?
Well, as the way I have been brought up and the way I have taught and the way I have shaped my political life is that to be worthy of the vote, and I think that as Americans, there's nothing more important than our vote. Our vote makes a statement. It makes a statement as to what we believe, who we are, and what we want to see this nation to become, or those principles we want maintained, or the direction that we want it to go for our children and grandchildren. I feel as though I can't waver from who I say I am. If I change just to get a vote, if I alter my positions, my principles, if I act against my character just so that you can vote for me, then that automatically, in my opinion, makes me unworthy of that vote, which so many people have died and so much blood has been shed over the last 200 or so years to preserve. So, my thing is, you either support me or you don't. You either believe in what I believe. I either represent you or I don't. Those individuals who I don't represent or I can't represent, that's the title. The title is representative. If you feel as though my principles do not represent your principles, then vote for the other guy, because I'm not going to alter mine just so that I can get a political title or a political office. And I think that's, you can't have a strong America and not have men and women who do that.
But Josh, this is exciting to me, because you and I deal with things all the time where people, politicians so many times are self-serving. It's not about the people that they serve. It's about what they can do for themselves. And what I see is that it's more important to you to be obedient to God than it is to have the favor of man. And, we've lost that in this country. We don't even, we want to take God out of everything, out of the Pledge of Allegiance, out of just everything, out of the 10 Commandments, off the walls of the schools, prayer out of everything. And so to hear you come in this studio and stand this strong by your religious convictions is so refreshing and encouraging to me as a person. It renews my faith, to be honest, in politicians, because I hear that, and it's not about winning. It's not about being a state representative. It's about being obedient to the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what I hear you saying. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. How can I make a claim to be a religious individual, to be a Christian, to be a minister, to be a father, to be a grandfather, but those principles that upon which I base those major parts of my life are malleable. They can be altered. They can be shaped in order to further my political career or my ambitions, my personal ambitions, or my carnal and secular ambitions. Well, that's ridiculous. And one of the main reasons why that America has been such an admired nation for so long, and that we have been able to, George Washington said, only God meant for America to be America, because he was outgunned, he was outmanned, he was outfinanced. He was going against the superpower of that age with a bunch of with this put together hodgepodge army made up of all types of diverse individuals, and they won. I think that America's edge has always been the fact that we are a Christian nation. When we lose that, when we compromise that, we get rid of our secret weapon. And I think that we as a people, folks want us to have an identity crisis to where we don't know who we are. I absolutely refuse to alter that. If it costs me the election, so be it. But it will not cost me my character, and I will not violate my conscience.
I love that statement, Josh, that God is our secret weapon. I mean, that is something I am going to use. I'm just, because I know that, but I've not heard it put that way, because we always talk about our weapons, but He's our secret weapon. And when He's on our side, we don't have to worry about the other things. And so, for me personally, I want you to talk about your pro-life stance, too, because it's so important to most of our listeners that their candidates are pro-life, and that they, Josh just got through taping a show just a few minutes ago about, it was a pro-life show. And so how did we get so far away from that to where we're more concerned about so many things than we are the life of the unborn? I mean, it just seems just like when they had the chance to pass the bill in Washington not to abort people based on gender, it failed. Mm-hmm. I mean, now we're at the point where we decide if we want a boy or a girl, and if we don't get what we want, we abort it. I mean, is that where we are in this country?
Well, what we've done is we have compromised our principles. Our principles are our foundation. You don't build a house on the sand. I mean, that's something all of us understand. This building that we sit in right now has a fortified foundation which holds the building. What we've done in America is we have compromised those principles that basically held us together as a people. I have always asked this question since the 70s, since being a young minister, since before it became this big political issue. In the 70s, I can pull tapes in the early 70s. In my teens, when my parents and pretty much everybody's minister, regardless of their religious faith, have always asked the question, how is it that a human male and a human female can get together as God ordained and not have something that is human? It makes no sense whatsoever. When you violate the fact that the safest place on the planet for a child should be its mother's womb, and now it's becoming one of the most dangerous places, where the sanctity of that life that's within, that God has placed there, has no value, and you have a person saying, it's my body, yeah, but there are two bodies involved here. And how do you have the right to make a decision on the life of that other person and that other body? And I think that we've got to go back to some foundation principles here in America and just really do an evaluation of who we are. And if we don't fight for this, then we lose everything.
Representative DeBerry, what we're talking about here, or what we hear a lot out in the culture, is the folks that disagree with what you just said will say this is a civil rights issue, that marriage equality, as the term has become known, is a civil rights issue, that folks should have marital equal rights in marriage, and life, that a woman should have equal rights, and they point back to the civil rights movements of the 50s and 60s. What would you say to those people that try to make that make those two different issues, in my view, be the same as the way they want to see it?
I believe that's an absolute erroneous position, and it absolutely there is no equality of the two. I was born February 5th, 1951, in John Gaston Hospital to John and Pearl DeBerry. On that day, I was not given a choice of my race. I was not given a choice of my gender. I was not given a choice of the color of my hair, the color of my skin, the color of my eyes. Those choices were made for me. From the minute my birth certificate was printed, it said colored. 1951. That's what it said. Now, I couldn't go in the closet and pretend not to be a black person. I could not hide the fact of my ethnicity. From the moment of my first breath, I have dealt with those issues. I couldn't go in the closet or behind a rock or behind a suit or behind a corporate title or behind money. These individuals, they say they're coming out of the closet. You know what? That is their absolute right.
Sure.
That is their absolute right. If this is what they want to say is good for them and their life, fine. But don't tell me that you're going to cross over into my rights. First of all, to disagree. Secondly, my rights to adhere to what the Bible speaks. And thirdly, my rights to raise my children as I see fit. They are absolutely not equal. When I went to certain schools, those schools were determined by my race. I couldn't hide from that. So for individuals who are just saying they have this particular decision in life, but nobody has known for the majority of their life, that's because they could hide it. How in the world is that a civil right? That's you. Your civil right was your decision to say that's what you're going to do. You have an absolute civil right to be homosexual if that's where you decide. But that's where that right ends.
Josh,
I'm sorry.
Representative, that's okay. We have to take a break, but we want you to pick up right where you left off. And listeners, stay tuned. This is MidSouth Viewpoint on Bot Radio Network. Welcome back. I'm Pat McClurkin on MidSouth Viewpoint, and I'm in the studio today with Josh Davis and Representative John DeBerry. And I'm telling you, Josh, I mean, I'm so fired up, I could go out and go door to door for this man. This is just unbelievable. It's exciting to me for somebody to have this kind of passion for righteousness. And so it's just a joy to have you on here today. So I want you to pick up where you left off. You made an excellent point, and I've never heard anybody put it quite that way, Josh, when
Put
you
it
asked
so
him,
succinctly.
Right. And so it was excellent. But, you know, I hear that all the time. And one of the things that, you know, I see in you is that you are content in who you are and know that God made you, and you're not trying to be another race, another person, another color, another anything, because you have succeeded. By the way, you said, you know, I was born, I can't change that. And so you've been successful because you've not tried to use any excuses or anything about your life to keep you from being that way.
Well, you couldn't use excuses in the house I was raised in. We were never given that luxury of using some excuse that had to do with your race or your height or where we happened to live or where my dad worked or where we were going to school. As a matter of fact, my parents were civil rights workers. My dad was the president at that time of the NAACP in Crockett County. We integrated the schools in Crockett County. My family were the first black children to go to the schools in Crockett County. Me, my brothers and sisters integrated the schools. My dad sent us there. We went without an agenda. We went without hostility, and we went without inferiority. We went, as people asked my dad, well, what do we do when we get up here with all these white children? He says, go to school. I said, well, you know, I was in the 9th grade at the time. Well, what do you mean go to school? He said, go to school. Well, I mean, we're integrating the schools, and there's some great message you have for me to carry. My dad said, look, you go to school. Don't scratch your head when it's not itching. Don't grin when it's not funny. Be a man. That's the great advice my dad gave me when we integrated the schools.
Well, it must have worked. It must have been good advice.
The issue is you go and act as though you belong there, that you are a man, that you're an individual, that you're an American. My dad was a Korean War veteran, and he didn't play that. We went to school, we did our work, we came home, we developed friendships that have lasted over 40 years. I have students from Alamo High and Crockett County High who come and visit me in Nashville because we're still friends, because we're more similar than we are different. And we stood on our principles then, we stood on what was right, and we developed lasting friendships. Folks have just got to stop fighting battles that don't exist and simply be what God made you to be.
Well, Josh, for the two of us, I mean, this is really exciting for us to hear him say this. And I don't know how we've not met him or interviewed him before, but I promise you will be back on our show again, because we have really, really learned a lot about how things should be. And my question to you is, how can we establish relationships with other politicians and other African Americans in a way that helps build bridges between us? I feel like we could be friends walking out of this room today,
right,
because we are like-minded.
Right.
So how can we get past all this racism in Memphis and all these things that we deal with now? And just because if you're a Christian, you should be walking in the same direction. You should have the same beliefs and the same ideals. And I mean, we're like-minded. I can tell that with Josh. And so how do we get there with other African Americans that are Christians? I mean, how can we get past this race issue that we have here in the city that's so devastating?
Well, first thing, we've got to stop allowing race to dictate every decision that we make in the city of Memphis. We've got to stop allowing those individuals who use race as an excuse to further their agenda from being successful. All of us have got to have mutual respect. We've all got to look eyeball to eyeball and respect the other individual for who they are and what God made them to be. When we do this and then talk about the issues, talk to each other, not at each other, respect each other for our individuality, and then act on the principles of God's law. And God teaches us He's not a respecter of persons. How in the world am I going to be a respecter of person if God tells me He's not a respecter of persons? So basically, we've got to stop listening to those individuals who get on the stump and manipulate us to divide ourselves into different categories and get our swords and our shields and prepare to fight, rather than come and sit down at the table and prepare to talk and find solutions. And I don't know any other way to put it other than that. Until we do that, we're not going to succeed in removing race.
In talking about contentious issues, recently here in the United States, we've had one, and it deals with state government, and that's why I wanted to get your opinion on it. Yes. There was just a recall election up in Wisconsin. Just want to get your viewpoint on just recall elections as a legislator, what you think about them, because this one was a little controversial because it had to do not with any misconduct. It had to do with some folks didn't like a policy that was put in place. Just give us your opinions on that.
Well, the bottom line is the best recall election is the election itself. What we do is we continue to elect people who we obviously know what they stand for because they've been in office forever. Mm-hmm. We obviously know what they believe. We obviously know how they're going to vote. We obviously know those issues that they're going to fight for. And we'll disagree vehemently, but we'll still elect them. I've seen that happen over and over. I don't know what the issues were on the recall election.
It had mainly to do with the right. He took away the right. It's more complicated than what I'm about to say. The right of public unions to collectively bargain, not private unions, but public unions, and that's what spurred the big recall election.
And he asked people to pay more into their pensions and their health care plan.
All that kind of stuff.
Because the state was going broke.
Well, here again, here is what I'm saying. If that individual has voiced these opinions, why was he elected in the first place? If he has voiced that he stands against certain things that we believe in, then why was he elected in the first place? Now we've got to go, and the people have got to make a stand and to recall him. You know what? It's probably going to send a ripple across the country that folks have had enough. that they are willing to spend the money to have an election. They're willing to stand in the politicians' faces. They're willing to take whatever criticism they're given for going in that direction so that they can start turning things around. You know, whether I believe in recall elections or not, I believe in the folks' rights to have who they know represents them. If I tell folk I represent one thing, and then I do something else, then what choice do they have?
Well, and the interesting thing about this, he did exactly what he told them he was
He
going to
made
do.
no bones about that's what he's going to do.
But the unions, they said, wait a minute, you can't take away our power. But you know what? The American people said, yes, we want to make decisions for ourselves.
Right.
And he was elected by a much wider margin the second time than he was the first time. And so what I see, he stood, he did not waver when they came against him, just as you've done, and he stood for exactly what he said he would do and what he believed in. So I'm hoping that this is going to send a ripple around this
Right.
country that, you know, you can stand and you don't have to change with the wind what you've told
Right.
people you're going to do. But I want to ask you before we run out of time, too, I want your thoughts on the upcoming presidential election, because I believe this is probably the most critical election in my lifetime. And I don't know where, if you listen to so many people that are experts on the economy, we are in real trouble in this country. And you mentioned being a grandfather and a father, and I'm a grandmother, and I'm really concerned about the direction of this country for my grandchildren. So I want to hear what you have to say about this election.
Well, unless we turn some things around, I don't necessarily want God to let me see the country that my grandchildren are going to have to grow up in, unless we turn some things around. Because I think that we're becoming a nation that we are muted. We are muted to the point that we don't have a voice. My daughter is a college student. She has to sit in a classroom where her teacher spends the entire time teaching them why he doesn't believe in God. But she can't say anything about why she does. We live in a nation where people who want to stand against everything we believe and everything we stand for, and they want to talk. And if you say anything, you're a bully. I was called an inbred Bible something on the internet by an individual simply because I have a different opinion than theirs. They can bully us, but we can't have an opinion. I think that this is going to be one of the most important elections in our nation's history. I think that Americans, I'm not going to tell folk how to vote. I'm not going to tell them how I'm going to vote. What I will tell them is this. For those individuals who stand up and obviously and blatantly and openly and publicly from powerful positions will stand there and go against the very basics of everything that we believe, nature itself, then it says that they're opening the door to Pandora's box, and out of which is going to come everything that will eventually undermine the very foundation of this nation that was built on God and the principles of God. You can't have one nation under God and then remove God from it at the same time.
Well, you know, we had a pastor that we loved dearly, Dr. Adrian Rogers, and he used to say exactly the same thing. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but when he finished telling us what you just did, we knew exactly how to vote. So, so you told us without telling us, and I would agree with that 100%. And Josh, we're almost out of time, so I think you've got something else on that piece of paper you want to ask.
Well, and I unfortunately, I don't know if we have a chance to get into it, because I know one of the things you were criticized for when you stood up for traditional values was the, quote, "Don't Say Gay" bill,
Right.
which is a unbelievably misleading name.
Right, most certainly misnomer.
In just a minute or so, explain what that bill actually was and then why you supported it.
I supported the bill because basically what it said is if you got to give it a name, it's the right to raise my children as I see fit bill.
Right.
It's to say I am not going to have an authority figure going into the classroom with young, impressionable children who probably still believe in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and have some influential authority figure make them question their gender. And make them question, to talk to little boys and tell them, well, you know, you may be a girl. And talk to little girls and say, well, you know, you may be a boy. Mm-hmm. Why in the world would any sensible parent who has not made the decision to raise their children that way, like some of them have, why would I want someone else to take that much control over the parenting and the mindset and the character of my child. If that's something that should be at home. If they want to do that to their children at home, that's their business. That is their civil right.
Right.
It is my civil right to say, no, you can't teach my child that, and I don't want my child at that impressionable age to even be exposed to that type of conversation. That's what the bill was about.
And the point you made, and I know we got to wrap it up, is we're talking about
No,
grade
we've got
school.
a few minutes. Go ahead.
Well,
We're
you're
good.
talking about grade school children here. We
Absolutely.
weren't. They tried to pass it off as we were talking about high school
No, we
kids and
weren't
all this
talking
kind of
about
stuff.
grade
and
school.
in the most part, we were talking about human reproductive classes, which I'm not an expert on the subject, but I think there's only one way that humans reproduce, and the way they were wanting to teach it would confuse 99.9% of grade school children.
I like the point he made about the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, because I will tell you, growing up, most of the things they want to teach these children today never even entered my mind until I was almost an adult, because we've taken away all their innocence, every
Right.
bit of it.
Right. Childhood is a place now where we're trying to cram a whole bunch of adult decisions into children who are unprepared and not capable of making such decisions. What we're doing is everybody wants to talk about the lost generation, but nobody wants to talk about who lost them and how we confused them and how we manipulated them. You can't live your life through your children. And here is something I think that a lot of folks are going to have to think about. There are certain natural things. I don't care where you stand on this side of the issue. Everybody knows that only a male and a female can reproduce. I don't care how you stand on this issue. If you got a child being born, there's a male and a female somewhere. It may have been in a petri dish or in a syringe, but there's a male and a female somewhere, because two males and two females cannot reproduce. I can perpetuate my family in the natural fashion. There are others who cannot perpetuate theirs in a natural fashion. So the only thing they can do to perpetuate their lifestyle is to influence our children.
Exactly.
And we had better get a clue, and we had better get it fast.
Well, listeners, I am so sorry. We're out of time. I know that this has been very informative and also encouraging to our listeners today to listen to Representative DeBerry and know how strong he is on his convictions and his beliefs. There's no doubt. You won't leave the radio program today without knowing where he stands on things. And but it's been our joy to have him on the show today, and we thank you so much for your time. And this is MidSouth Viewpoint on Bot Radio Network.
Thanks for listening to MidSouth Viewpoint. If you'd like to join the conversation, you can email us. Our address is wcrv@botradionetwork.com. This has been MidSouth Viewpoint, another Christian news and information feature from Bot Radio Network 640 AM.